Jungkook will soon be free from military service, but instead Jimin stayed away, giving a scathing remark that hurt the army. Meanwhile, Taehyung seems to be getting closer to Jungkook. What does all this mean? Has the relationship they've been hiding finally come to light? Or is Taehyung the reason for everything? What would happen if all the signals, all the gazes, and all the little gestures that had been ignored turned out to be no coincidence? Have you also ever felt that there is something that Jungkook and Jimin don't say, yet it feels so real? And while everyone was busy waiting for Jungkook's release from his mandatory military service, why did Jimin, the man who should have greeted him most warmly, withdraw, hurt the army with his cold words, and seem completely gone? Is it all because of Taehyung? Is he the reason why Jimin chose to be silent, chose to stay away, and finally said a sentence that made thousands of fans feel like they were slashed? No one would have thought that it all started with one familiar-sounding phrase. "We'll talk later." That was Jungkook's message to Jimin backstage before they started their final project before enlistment. But behind that sentence, there was so much pressure, there was a feeling that could not be said, and there was an unsolved secret. And when the project was over, when all said goodbye, when the army wept watching them one by one enter the military, only one person never really said goodbye with his eyes open: Jimin. He's just down. Not much to say. And even in the last broadcast with Jungkook, which looked like it would be normal for some, many army noticed, there was no eye contact. No warm hugs as usual. There is no characteristic laughter of them. Just silence. Too loud for those who understand. But everything changed when it recently emerged an accidental voice recording was heard in the background of HYB's rehearsal, allegedly coming from Jungkook himself. In that voice, there was one sentence: "If he's still angry, let me go first." A sentence that made netizens wonder, who does he mean? And why does Jungkook sound sad? Many thought the phrase was for managers or even members of the production team. But ARMY, who has been observing Jungkook and Jimin's relationship closely, has a different opinion. They know that only one person is always silent when angry. Only one person chooses to walk away when disappointed. And only one person uttered a cold phrase in a supposedly joyful moment: Jimin. Why didn't Jimin welcome the news of Jungkook's release from military service with the usual enthusiasm? Don't they always share great moments together? Isn't Jimin the most emotional, the most open in welcoming the members back? But this time, it's different. Even very different. The only reaction Jimin came up with was a short post. Not everything should be celebrated if your heart is still wounded. And that sentence seems to slap the army indirectly, as if to show that something inside him is not finished. But what wounds are meant? And who hurt him? Right after the upload, a short video emerged in which Taehyung is seen with Jungkook in a recording session for a secret project. They laughed. They seem very close. There was even one moment where Jungkook touched Taehyung's shoulder and said, "It can finally be like this, yes." Ordinary-looking moments unless you know that they are the ones he used to say to Jimin first. In their meaningful moments, did I ask Jungkook starting to replace his role? Or furthermore, has Taehyung been secretly a shadow that makes Jimin slowly move away? Some army even dug back old footage, their live broadcasts, vlogs, to Instagram comments, and what they found was astonishing. On many occasions, Jimin looks uncomfortable when Jungkook mentions Taehyung's name too often. In an old vlog, when they were eating together, Jimin even said, "Why don't you just invite Taehyung if you want to laugh all the time?" A comment that at the time was considered a joke. But now, nobody laughed. And now, toward the last days of Jungkook's military service, the pressure is growing. ARMY awaits the moment of tearful reunion between him and Jimin. All they see is silence. No message. No welcome. There's no hope. Even on the official Hybe broadcast, Jimin did not appear even once. Isn't that awkward? What exactly happened? Why are two people who used to be so close now so far apart? Have they been giving each other hints in secret, but never really talking? If you remember, during the last concert before they entered the military, Jungkook sang Jimin's part with a trembling voice. It even sounds like holding back tears. But after the concert, she did not mention Jimin at all in her messages. Meanwhile, Jimin also began to reduce his interactions on social media, especially when it came to Jungkook. And when Jimin released his solo song, a song touted as a message for someone who moves away without explanation, many speculated that the song was about love, about leaving. But some of the lyrics now feel clearer. If you choose it, please don't come back just because it's quiet. I'm not your escape. That sentence now makes the army shiver. Is the you here Jungkook? And is the chosen he Taehyung? Could it be that all this time all three were trapped in a complex emotional triangle? Is their platonic love too deep to hurt each other secretly? No one can answer for sure. But every upload, every look, and every gesture that used to be considered the wind then is now evidence that cannot be ignored. And when Jimin refused to welcome Jungkook publicly, the army began to split. I blame Jimin. Some people are suspicious of Taehyung, and there are those who weep in silence because they feel that something very valuable has been destroyed without them being able to save it. Now, one big question hangs in the air, have Jungkook and Jimin ever really loved each other in silence, but ended up having to move away because of a third person? Or have they been just gesturing without ever having the courage to tell the truth? And if finally everything is revealed later, are we ready to hear the truth? Army, stand by. Because the day when all those secrets will be revealed seems to be getting closer. And when that day comes, when Jungkook's footsteps are heard entering the military release gate, there are millions of pairs of eyes waiting, not just out of longing, but out of wanting to see the one thing that hasn't really happened since all this awkwardness started. Jimin's reaction, is this a sign that something has really broken between them? Or is this a conscious decision that there are two deep wounds to disguise just for the sake of pleasing the public? It wasn't just Army who was crying because he saw Jungkook coming back, but because they realized something was missing. Something that used to be the pulse of each of their interactions. Jimin and Jungkook's connection. Surprisingly, it was he who actually appeared first, welcoming Jungkook in an open broadcast. Send emoji. Leave a comment. Even reshared old photos of the two of them. And when asked by a fan, "Are you waiting for Jungkook?" Taehyung only replied with one sentence, which shook the entire fandom, until finally an upload appeared from a Japanese fanbase account that got a leak from a staff on site. In the leak, it was reported that Jimin was deliberately absent from Jungkook's release. Even further, he asks not to be highlighted if it is in an adjacent location. Why? Because Jimin, the source said, is at the stage of accepting reality. Accept reality? What kind of statement? Is it about feelings that are never reciprocated, or about a relationship that changes direction because of a choice that cannot be rejected? We can't just guess. But the army began to gather evidence. They went back through all the V-Live, Weverse videos, even old screenshots from BTS's chat group that they had shared in the documentary. And just then, all eyes turned to one strange clue that used to be considered a joke. The nickname Nighttime Bully that Taehyung once gave Jungkook. Nighttime when members sleep, when someone used to send a message or knock on the door quietly. Is that a joke? Or is there something to hide from all of us? And if it's true that those nights kept a hidden conversation between Jungkook and Taehyung, where was Jimin's role then? One of the old army, known as BTS Interaction Observers, even wrote in a long thread. In the past, when Jungkook was silent, Jimin was always sensitive. He was the first to come to his senses. But later, Jungkook is silent, and the first to approach is Taehyung. Something's changed. And this is what makes everything even more complex. When you realize that small changes are no longer just a phase, but a new reality, you begin to ask, is their platonic love that once made many soldiers cry with happiness now a source of inexplicable wounds? Is Jungkook and Jimin's relationship only beautiful because it has never been tested by distance and time? Or is it that the feelings that once existed between them were too deep? Until the distance came, they chose to save each other. Rather than save each other, and even more painful, when you realize that maybe Jimin didn't leave out of anger, but because he knows he is no longer the intended person. What if all the cues from Jungkook, the song, the look, the smile, were for Jimin? But Jimin came too slowly to reply, and when he was ready, has Jungkook changed? What if Jimin had been silent all this time not because he didn't care, but because he was too sensitive, because he saw what the army hasn't seen, because he's conscious that Taehyung was there first? Such wounds cannot be treated with a post or clarification, and such love cannot heal just because of time. What, then, will happen now? Will Jimin remain silent, keeping everything? But is it true that Jungkook has turned his back? Or is all this just a deliberate misunderstanding? This question slapped millions of soldiers who for years believed that no one could replace Jimin's place in Jungkook's heart. Those who kept the little moments, the quiet smiles, the eyes that looked for each other even when the stage was sparkling, are now forced to accept the fact that it is all that it is, maybe just one-sided memories. And as one after another snippets of the past began to be replayed by fans looking for answers, there was one clip from 2019 that suddenly went viral again. The clip when Jimin, during a behind-the-scenes session of a concert in Japan, was seen sitting alone on the stairs, staring at his phone screen, then smiling slightly as he said quietly, "I don't need much, just so he knows I'm always there." The word "he" at that time was thought to refer to Jungkook, but now, with all the changes that have taken place, ARMY asked, is it a smile of hope? Or a desperate smile? And after the conscription separates them all, it seems that the time that was originally expected strengthens the bond. It scratches even deeper wounds. Especially when Taehyung's signals become too bright to ignore. ARMY, known by the account name at Jimin on Platform X, wrote his observations in a bitter tone. Watch the way Jungkook says Taehyung's name live. Now it's warmer, lighter. But he no longer calls Jimin. Since when? Since the Seoul Final Concert. Seoul Final Concert. A moment once celebrated, now remembered with wounds. Because it was there for the first time, fans realized that Jimin was standing some distance away from Jungkook, that there was no eye contact as usual, and that after the concert, only Taehyung is seen approaching and hugging the magne. What happened then? Why did Jim stay away? Or who kept him away? There are many theories. But one common thread leads to one thing, a sense of loss that is never explained. And when asked by fans in a virtual call session why he's been seen more alone lately, Jimin replied with a smile that wasn't just tired, but seemed to convey a hidden message. Sometimes, our happiness drives others away. What does that mean? Who's happy? Who's staying away? And then, just like completing this big puzzle, came footage from a Chinese fan site who accidentally recorded BTS's rehearsal moments a few months before the draft began. In the video, Jimin and Jungkook are seen talking slowly, and from the lip movements analyzed by fans, Jimin appears to say, "If you're comfortable with that, I won't bother you anymore." Simple sentences, but full of meaning. Was it an emotional breakup that was never announced? And Taehyung was just a few steps away from them, stare, without a smile, without reaction, silence. But solid ARMY, who has been following the dynamics of the three for too long, begins to theorize that what happened between Jungkook, Jimin, and Taehyung wasn't just a personality difference, but most likely an emotional triangle that never got any room to resolve. And as the public gets busy discussing each member's comeback, music, and individual activities, loyal fans see the other side of the story, that unrequited love can be a very lonely burden. Imagine being Jimin, watching someone who was once the center of your world now seem comfortable with someone else. Imagine being Jungkook, halfway between two people who once saved you from the dark days, but now demand a different direction. And imagine being Taehyung, seeing everything up close, but never really welcome to talk. Then the question is now, who really loves first? Who goes first? And who gives up first? Because when love is not announced, a broken heart does not have a funeral.